Bits and Bricks.
Welcome to Bits and Bricks, a podcast about all things LEGO games. I'm Ethan Vincent.
And I'm Brian Crecente. Together, we look back at the rich 25-year history of LEGO games, chat with early developers and seasoned studios who have all tackled the creation of video games for one of the most popular and respected toy companies in the world, the LEGO Group.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, man, how's it going?
It's going great. It's another wonderful episode, a conversational episode today.
Yeah.
And we are looking at LEGO Overwatch.
Yeah.
While the LEGO Group has been, making video games for more than 25 years now, physical LEGO brick sets and themes that are built around, existing non-LEGO Group video games are actually fairly rare. I think the first one, was born out of the concept in the LEGO Cuso program, which later became LEGO Ideas, and that was based on Minecraft. And that original pitch became the Minecraft Micro World. It's that forest set, and it was released, I think, in June 2012, June 6th, 2012, to be exact.
Yeah.
And, that first set led to dozens of more releases, and Minecraft remains obviously one of the most popular themes for that company. But, since the first video game theme release, there have been fairly few new video game additions to official LEGO game theme sets, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, which is, on some level, at least as a gamer, it seems strange to me. So you've got, as you mentioned, you've got Minecraft, obviously.
Yeah.
Huge deal. And then LEGO Dimensions, which was the LEGO Group and TT Games' take on Toys to Life. That brought with it this amazing bunch of add-on packs, some of which were based on video games like, Sonic the Hedgehog, and they had that really cool Midway arcade, and of course Portal was one of the sets. And then earlier this year, the LEGO Group announced it was turning this LEGO Ideas creation based on Sonic the Hedgehog and the game's Green Hill Zone into its own set. So that's another one.
Yeah, and don't forget last year's mega hit, LEGO Super Mario and the NES model.
Yeah, that's true. But back in 2018, the LEGO Group and Blizzard Entertainment announced that the two companies were working on this new range of LEGO theme sets based on Blizzard's popular Overwatch game, which, when that news broke, I was over the moon. And so the first 6 sets were unveiled in November 2018, and then they went on sale in January 2019. But actually, the talks between the two companies started way back in 2017. And probably not too surprising if you know a little bit about how the LEGO Group works and some of its own sort of core concepts. The project had a number of major hurdles to clear before the sets would be able to come to life.
Yeah, that's true. And I think one of those hurdles included things like the LEGO Group's traditional stance against featuring contemporary weapons of any sorts, right? And in its themes, as well as trying to kind of narrow down which of the game's many popular characters and settings, should be turned into LEGO sets. I imagine that to be pretty overwhelming, right, Brian? Where it's like,
totally.
If you look at a video game, it's like, I want everything to be turned into LEGO theme sets. But obviously not possible. So really cool. We were able to chat with Mike Hummel, who's the director of product development for Blizzard Consumer Products, about how a mutual respect between the LEGO Group and Blizzard Entertainment around, the wonderful creations both companies make inspired and fueled the creation of these popular sets. So, Mike, can you tell me a little bit about, how the LEGO Group and Blizzard started? Like the year these first conversations kind of got off the ground?
Yeah, let me think about that. I think things began to shift into high gear probably shortly right after the announcement of the game. One thing we see is that the Overwatch community is constantly inspiring the Blizzard teams, with artwork, videos, and custom LEGO builds, created from their own collections. Looking at those, that's when we really wanted to pursue the opportunity of bringing, our Overwatch universe to life, through LEGO bricks.
Yeah.
Let me think. When conversations began, I can remember we had a lot of initial ideas, and a lot of them actually went on to become construction sets. From my own experience, on the consumer product side, I can remember I really wanted to see a physical transforming Bastion. And so, I was really excited when LEGO first visited the Blizzard campus, and, that Bastion prototype was one of the very first sets they showed us.
Wait, so if there are for some reason, some people out there who have not seen Bastion, I know that's boggles the mind, but if that were true, how would you describe what Bastion is?
Well, Bastion is this amazing character that, within the game, he's got 3 different modes. And so that really allows, from a consumer products perspective, it's very interesting that it's 3-in-1 characters. And to being able to work with the LEGO brick engineers to engineer that product so that all 3 of those modes were captured and you could transform them from one mode to the next was really exciting for us.
Yeah, and he's sort of like is it fair to call him a robot? Is that off brand? Like what do you guys internally, what do you refer to him as?
Let's call him an Omnic.
Oh, right, of course. So obviously Overwatch is huge, has a huge following, but you guys also have World of Warcraft, you have Diablo, you've got all of these amazing IP. Why was it that Overwatch was the one that you felt was like, this is the right game for a LEGO set?
I think we were really guided by the characters, and the maps of Overwatch. The many maps of Overwatch allow players to adventure in a hopeful future, kind of on like a global scale, and if you think about some of those maps from the Horizon Lunar Colony to, to the Hollywood, it was really like a playground of possibilities when we were able to work with the LEGO group on figuring out what those initial sets were going to be. There's a diverse cast of characters from the game, and they have so many different skins. It just seems like it was a perfect fit for the LEGO minifigure format. And then, even think about the vehicles, right? One of the sets we did was the Dorado Showdown set. So we even get the benefit of having, more people spend time on the payload by constructing it through the LEGO kits.
Yeah, it is. And, what you guys ended up with is simply amazing. I am curious, once you decided you wanted to move forward on this, how was it that the 2 groups worked together? Were you sort of coming to the table with pitches, or like, what was that back and forth like?
To my memory, from the very beginning of the process, it was a highly collaborative opportunity between the 2 groups. I mean, there were multiple trips. Mm-hmm. We had both teams visit the respective company headquarters for creative syncs on what we wanted to do. The LEGO brick engineers presented a number of prototypes for the Overwatch game developers to take a look at, to get their feedback.
Yeah.
From my perspective, it was one of the best meetings I've had the opportunity to attend during my time at Blizzard. Speaking of that, that Bastion piece, I can remember being very distracted in that very first meeting because I kept looking at it and I wanted to get up during the meeting and convert it into tank mode.
That's so cool. And so was that that initial prototype, was it something that could be actually changed, or was it something they designed to be able to sort of go between modes?
That was the first question I had, and I was asked to, don't jump ahead, don't jump ahead, wait till they presented during the meeting. And then ultimately they did show us that, they were thinking about it when they were making the prototype, that they wanted it to change. And that was something that we wanted to see in the final model that was released.
That's very cool. Now, were you among the few Blizzard folks who went to Bill in Denmark, to LEGO Group's headquarters to kind of do the tour?
Maybe after the pandemic, I'll have the opportunity to participate in a second visit. I did get a chance to talk to my colleagues, and they told me it was an exceptionally memorable experience for them. They got to visit the LEGO house, the production factory. They were given a tour of where they store, every LEGO set that's ever been created. I can say, as someone who helps the internal Blizzard archival team that maintains historic products, for our BlizzCon convention and for campus displays, I would very much like the opportunity to visit the LEGO studios.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing place. I think you'd really enjoy the archives at the LEGO Idea House. But it sounds like you have something very similar to. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
We do have a team that's dedicated to maintaining, artifacts from all of the Blizzard games. The group also runs the library that we have at our headquarter campus in Irvine, and all of those things are kept in a similar process. We're inspired by what LEGO's done, And every year at BlizzCon, we march those out and we let the fans interact with them.
Nice.
If I believe at BlizzCon 2019, we had the Blizzard Arcade, and that was a great place for us to show off some of those cooler things from Blizzard's past.
That's very cool. So you all have these meetings. I understand they came to visit you as well. Once you decided on doing this, doing the Overwatch-themed LEGO sets, how did you go about deciding which of the many settings and characters should be turned into sets?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was an iterative process between the teams on what we wanted to do. To my memory, we started with like a basic outline of how many sets would be included, at launch. And we got to see the size and the brick piece count of those products and what we were looking to build towards after the initial releases. We mapped out a list of possibilities, and then we began to focus on which Overwatch maps and the specific characters that worked well for the different set configurations we were considering. We really wanted, a diverse selection of characters and locations for players to build with those very first sets. Sometimes it was, we concepted around a central set piece. I'm thinking maybe the rocket in the Watchpoint Gibraltar set, and then other times, it was really all about the characters, like the Junkrat and the Roadhog Junkertown kit.
Were there any particular challenges that you all faced, either in trying to come up with, which figures you wanted, or did the LEGO group come back to you and say, hey, it's really hard, for instance, with Bastion, it's very hard to have him do this sort of mode change. Were there things like that you guys had to work on to try to figure out solutions for?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I can remember is, we knew from the beginning, one of the first things that we were talking about is that we really wanted that LEGO Diva piece, but we needed it to be sized in proportion so that her minifigure, would fit inside of her mech. And, what the game team was really impressed with was the LEGO Group's creative solution for the Reinhardt build that was actually included, in that release. If you look at it, this was something that wasn't pulled directly from the video game, but the solution allowed for that Reinhardt minifigure to be at the same scale as the other character figures in the series. And simultaneously, because of that creative solution, his large format, his armored version was appropriately sized. And together, those two pieces, created this amazing double tank set.
Very cool. Yeah, that is, it's very neat to see how those minifigures interact with their vehicles or as you said, I guess, the armor. So were you there, or I'm assuming if you weren't there, you at least saw the reaction when this was unveiled. What was it like at BlizzCon when these were rolled out?
I was there, and for sure it was one of my favorite memories from the convention that year. I mean, thinking about it, between the set displays, we had a behind-the-scenes panel with the LEGO brick engineers, and of course there was that 8-foot-tall LEGO Diva statue. For us, for the consumer products team, it was definitely the premier event for the show. The fans shared that same level of excitement and anticipation that we had, when we first learned that we would have the opportunity to work with the LEGO Group. I can remember before we could publicly announce the partnership, it was incredibly difficult for me not to reveal anything to my son and daughter. So, in addition to being able to see and hear the players' reactions firsthand at the convention, I received the additional benefit of being the coolest dad in the world, and I still have the mug to prove it.
So you mentioned the Diva and I think Toki, the mech statue that you had on display. How did that come about? Was that something that the LEGO Group came up with, and did they build it on site, or did it have to be transported?
Yeah, there's quite a few stories about that piece. Actually, there were two of them made, and they went on a world tour after BlizzCon before one of them received a permanent home at the Blizzard Irvine campus. In both on-site constructions, of these pieces, they actually had professionals come out and build out the installations. I was there while they were doing it, and I was able to check out it was a massive instructional booklet that accompanied the displays making the statues. I can remember I volunteered to take a week of my own time and attempt to build it myself. But yeah, they told me my time was better spent somewhere else.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that decision. But ultimately, it was probably better that we left it up to the professionals. Some other fun facts about that, that statue is constructed of 144,000 bricks. And we were told it contains the most pink bricks of any display that LEGO has ever created.
That's very cool. So you, in 2019, I think it was, you guys released this amazing brick Bastion, Lego brick themed skin for a Bastion inside Overwatch, which is sort of the opposite of what you all were doing with the LEGO group. How did that come about? And were there any sort of challenges? Was that a LEGO group idea or a Blizzard idea? And yeah, I'm just curious what the process was there.
It was a shared experience. Our collaboration opportunities with the LEGO group, the brick community, and the Blizzard fans allows us to go beyond just the construction sets. I mean, there were a lot of things that we had the opportunity to pursue, from the LEGO animated videos to we ran some player tournaments, our game developers building some sets on camera. We continue to look for opportunities to bring both of these worlds together in new ways. Now, within the game, we support events that allow us to put the spotlight on an Overwatch character, and we can reward players with the opportunity to earn a new skin while playing the game. And that program, that was the genesis that really allowed us to collaborate with the LEGO group on the release of that brick-inspired Bastion skin.
So I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Overwatch 2. Obviously, a lot of anticipation for that game. I think it's coming out next year. I think at least that's the latest we've heard. I'm curious, are there any talks right now underway with the LEGO group about perhaps coming up with some new LEGO sets themed around the new game?
We have no new updates to share at this time, but there will be future opportunities for sure for us to reveal more about some new Blizzard consumer products. The Blizzard websites and our social channels are the best sources for new information, and we encourage everyone to continue to watch these spaces.
Do you think it's fair to say that the LEGO group and Blizzard Entertainment aren't finished working together? Like, I'm assuming that sounds like there's still talks, at least between the two companies?
We are definitely still talking with each other. We are looking for new opportunities, but again, we have no new updates to share at this time.
Home isn't always where we live. For most of us, live in many worlds. Home is an indefinable space.
What you're hearing is the opening of Blizzard's 30th anniversary Welcome Home trailer. And visually, it's epic. And so if you haven't seen it, go to YouTube, check it out. But yeah, it's a very special year for Blizzard Entertainment, 30 years. That's amazing. So I guess my last question, Mike, is, speaking maybe, for the company as a whole, or at least, in what you've heard around the company, what do you think it's been like for people who work at Blizzard Entertainment to see some of the company's creations immortalized in LEGO brick theme sets?
Yeah, this is definitely a special year for Blizzard. Our 30th anniversary celebrations allow us to share, memorable moments from our past as we head towards Overwatch's 5th anniversary, which is also happening later this year. As part of the Blizzard consumer products team, we are very thankful for the opportunity to work with the LEGO company. It was one of the high points of my professional career. 8-year-old me is very proud of, older me.
Nice one. Yeah. I enjoyed that interview.
Yeah.
It was great hearing about the love that the LEGO group has for Blizzard Entertainment's collection of video games, and how that, helped shape which game the company would decide to turn into theme sets. And, I haven't really played Overwatch much. It's kind of a confession. I know about it, but yeah, I'm not living in that world right now. But explain it to me a little bit, Brian. Tell me a little bit about the game, and obviously helping audiences who aren't familiar with the game.
Yeah, sure. So Overwatch is what's known as a hero shooter. And what that means is that it's a team-based, multiplayer, first-person shooter game. So think of it as sort of like Call of Duty, but in this sense, it's very cartoonish. The characters include things like, giant gorillas and a woman in a mech. and another woman who can fly with these angel wings. So there's a number. There's 32 playable characters. And so to play the game, what happens is that people are sort of matched up and they're dropped into this match. They're broken into two teams. They choose among those 32 playable characters which ones they want to play for the match. Mm-hmm. And gameplay is essentially boiled down to one side, one team trying to achieve some sort of goal. So that can be things like escorting a payload, which is like a truck across the map. Yeah. And then the other side is trying to stop them from doing that, from achieving that goal. And this is usually done through this sort of fantasy, cartoonish gunplay. Mm-hmm. So the game was designed to be, and it turns out is, a very popular form of esport as well. So you see this being played on a competitive level, both professionally and even on the college level.
Yeah, which, it's kind of interesting because turning this into Lego's theme set is a bit unusual, I think, even on a number of levels, right, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the ways they did this is that the Overwatch as a property has sort of outgrown its initial video game, if that makes sense. So it's gone on to become sort of a broader franchise. And so now there are these sort of short cartoon-like videos that you can watch that actually provide backstory to the characters. And there's even a digital comic series. And there's this very rich sort of overworld and all of these backstories that they're really only hinted at in the game because the game is so, it's like a football match, where everybody has a goal and they're trying to achieve something. But you've got this massive backdrop that the Blizzard Entertainment and the developers are really just starting to explore. Nice. And I think that helps a lot with the LEGO Group's approach.
Yeah, it sounds like you could argue that the LEGO Overwatch theme sets are more about, the broader world in which, Overwatch exists than maybe the actual gameplay, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool. So we actually talked to Sten Lysdahl. He's the senior marketing lead in product development at the LEGO Group about, this very question. The first question that we obviously like to ask everyone is if, does anyone at the LEGO Group play Blizzard games or Overwatch? Are there any super fans out there you know of, Sten?
Plenty, I would say. I can't count how many I know of. In my current team, we have a long-time WoW player, very dedicated, know every bit details. Even remember back on the process of developing Overwatch, how many people came actually to the project. I remember coming in and offering support and showing their passion for the franchise and the game. I know we had one who actually met her husband in a Blizzard game.
Wow.
Who was also herself a high-ranking Mercy player, I think, in one of the top 500 players in the world at that time. So there was a lot of dedication around it. Yeah. So there's quite a few, I would say, not just Blizzard games, but also just games in general.
So I have to think that some of that passion that some of those people had at the LEGO Group for Blizzard games, and in particular for Overwatch, must have been an important part of the decision to try to get this made into a theme set. The reason I ask that is I think Overwatch as a video game, because it has guns in it, and because it has that sort of cartoon level violence, there must have been some pushback at the beginning. So I'm just curious, was that a big challenge? And what was it that made the team decide to really fight to have this made?
For me, gaming is a little bit like a franchise. And I think when you start talking to people at the LEGO Group about what world this game would live in, or what context it lives in, it's a franchise born within a game. And I think in many ways, we can draw similarities to other franchises who also have guns. So I think once you start telling that story, I think people quickly understand what we're talking about and why guns is not necessarily a big concern. So I think that's the short storyline. I think when we dive into it, I think Overwatch is a very colorful and inclusive world where I think many people, or the game itself and the creators, Kaplan and the team, wanted really to sell is the fantasy in the universe, right? With speaking gorillas and hamsters and so forth. And I think the interesting part is that when it's fantasy, the premises changes, like with Star Wars or Batman and so forth. So guns become secondary. It's of course something we reflect upon and talk about. It's not, we know that people are looking at the LEGO Group for many reasons. And I think one of them is definitely also the violence aspect of it. So it's very much about how you interpret that game world or franchise. So of course there was dialogue, and we talked back and forth about that as well here. But I wouldn't say it was a massive concern. I think every time you enter a new territory like games, there are some people who are new to that, and particularly if they're not familiar with gaming themselves. And therefore these conversations, of course, have to take place, and they took place to some extent, I would say, just to make sure everybody was on the same page.
So Sten, we talked to Mike a little bit about this, but I'm curious about this origin of the Blizzard Entertainment LEGO Group collaboration and kind of your side of the story here. How did this idea come about?
To my knowledge, the conversation started back in 2017. And I think I wasn't part of the first meetings with Blizzard. And I think as soon as Overwatch actually came out, there was an interest and I think on our side at least, we kept an eye on it from the very get-go. And I also know Blizzard had an eye on LEGO to some extent at least. But I think the first serious conversations took place in 2017 among senior staff, and then I was brought in at the end of 2017.
So this idea sort of starts floating around. Did it start with Overwatch, or was it just you wanted to do something with one of the properties that Blizzard Entertainment had?
Overwatch was on our radar because of the way the universe is sort of constructed or built. We have an eye out for any entertainment franchises, and particularly gaming, that we find relevant and interesting. But definitely Overwatch was the one we had on our radar early on.
And what was it? I know you talked a little bit about that, but was it sort of the inclusivity and the creativity of the world that drew you to Overwatch in particular?
I think it's the storyline behind Overwatch that really intrigued us. I think there's the fantasy element, of course, because on the surface, if you don't dive into trying to understand Overwatch, I think it can be many things. But once you familiarize yourself with Overwatch and understand it, what the game is about and how it's trying to basically fight for a better world, and the characters, how well created they are, and background stories, and how much effort I think Blizzard put into making this an inclusive and colorful world that really has a broad appeal, but also stands for something. I think that was what really always caught our interest.
So I understand that during this process, I think early on, there were a group of people from the LEGO Group who went to Blizzard's headquarters, and then some people from Blizzard Entertainment who came to the LEGO Group. What were those meetings like, those trips?
I remember the first time being in Blizzard headquarters, I was a bit starstruck, I must admit. I'm a big fan of Overwatch, and meeting Jeff Kaplan for the first time, that's humbling, I think, when you meet people and from something you're very passionate about yourself. But I also think it was just meeting a world of the whole sort of Blizzard team behind Overwatch, and seeing, they're super kind people. They're passionate about what they do. They're passionate about Lego. And I think we were super excited on the LEGO Group side just for being there and talking about this. And we brought different concepts idea. We, of course, prepared a lot. So bringing a lot of those ideas along and sitting at the Blizzard headquarters and talking about a future product line like Overwatch, that was super exciting. And I also think I quickly realized there was quite a good, there's a lot of respect and good energy in the room, just over the course of the stay in Irvine, but also when the Blizzard team came to Denmark and Billund headquarters. I think they're super passionate about Lego as well. So I think there's generally, I would say it was a super collaborative approach we had to the whole project. And I think the passion from both sides helped fuel that a lot. And that started from the very get-go of those first meetings in Irvine. Later on in Billund, it continued there.
Would you say it was sort of a hard sell to convince Blizzard that they should have an Overwatch LEGO theme set, or was that something they were on board with right away?
I think they were on board right away. I think we had ideas around it, but I also think they had many ideas as well. I think they also came up with some early ideas on how it could look like. So it was quite easy to get going. I think what's interesting when you talk about gaming, character-driven universes, is always how you translate it into a very square world. So there's a lot of organic forms in Overwatch, basically because of the characters, but it could also be down to the vehicles. So I think we talked a lot about what it could look like, and I think some of the early conversations were definitely around sort of the DNA of what a LEGO Overwatch product would look like.
That's cool, yeah. So Brian and I were talking, and we heard a fun story. And it was about the LEGO Group first going over there, and you had Bastion with you, and there were some people at Blizzard who were very antsy, to get their hands on it and to change it into different modes. What was that meeting like?
I clearly remember that meeting. I think we were in the room, sort of in one of the Overwatch team's core room, meeting rooms, and we brought a whole bunch of models, basically a range of models to test out, what would work and what wouldn't work. And we didn't know what the Overwatch team would think of the different ideas and directions. But one of them definitely caught on the eye immediately was the Bastion model. We have a fantastic designer, Louis, who works tirelessly on it. And the first time the Overwatch team saw that, they were just immediately in love with it. Yeah, at least it's my interpretation, like many others were. So it was just a great meeting, and the transformation of the model that actually didn't come around in the first round of the model. I think Louis did 3-4 rounds of that model before we got it right. And everybody was happy about it. So the first time you see the model, came as Bastion as a character, and not turned into a turret. And then once you see the transformation and show that to the Overwatch team, they were. I think the jaws dropped a bit. I think I think we felt it was a really strong representation of their character. And I think once you also see the transformation, people and the Overwatch team was really surprised and happy about it, I would say.
That's curious. I'm interested in how it was you guys would go about. I know obviously the LEGO team has a lot of experience recreating things using LEGO bricks and elements. How did you go about figuring out things like the transformation? And also, were there challenges? I know we've interviewed other designers who've talked about, for instance, with Doctor Who, having to have special bricks made to get the color right. Were there things like that came up with the Overwatch set?
Absolutely. I think we had 2 larger batches we done where there was a lot of tweaks to it. I think the interesting part with Overwatch was we did a lot of research and insights on it from the very early on, to understand also what would Overwatch mean in the world of a LEGO consumer, but also what is important for an Overwatch fan. When we talk about, would you translate their passion into LEGO? What would they care about? What would they think is important? And a lot of learnings insights came out of that. I think it's interesting, for example, with the Millennium Falcon, you see that for a short amount of time in a movie. So it's not that you have a deep knowledge around what the interiors look like. Of course, you can freeze images and you can sort of study them. But overall, it's a movie piece that moves on, and then unless you've watched the Han Solo movie, I think then it's fairly short time you spend with that model, to be fair. But when you talk to people who game a lot and people who Overwatch fans who play this game so much, they know the ins and outs of this world. So authenticity becomes extremely important. You have to care about these models down to the very little details, and translation of how you translate that world, because not everything can be directly transformed into LEGO or the LEGO system, or the LEGO group brick system. It's important to get that right, and there are some ways we translate certain things when it comes to the bricks. So that was very interesting to do, and there were certain elements across the line that were particularly, of course, a lot of focus on, particularly in characters. So we molded a lot of new elements, particularly around hair pieces and so forth.
Yeah. Speaking of minifigures, Sten, when we were talking with Mike and the folks at Blizzard, they mentioned how surprised they were that the LEGO team was able to kind of nail the scale, like the sizing of the minifig actually fitting inside these vehicles and armor in one case. Was that pretty challenging, or was that something that you were absolutely sure that the LEGO design team could nail?
I mean, there's a lot of talented designers at the LEGO group, I would say. But yes, it was. I would say it was a challenge. There's a lot of rebuilds of the models to make sure we had the right proportions and it felt true and authentic to Overwatch. So yeah, of course, a Diva was one where we had to figure out the exact right way of getting the minifigure to fit into the cockpit.
Yeah.
We also had a fun story around Reinhardt.
Yeah.
Where we brainstormed around the set and how Reinhardt could actually be a minifigure as well as a head. It didn't come in the first iteration for sure.
Yeah. So I'm curious, internally at the LEGO group, were there a lot of people, I guess 2 questions. One, were there a lot of people vying to be the designers for these sets because it was so popular? And also, was there a lot of conversation about which characters were going to make the cut? I'm assuming everybody there who plays the game probably has favorites and probably wanted to see them in LEGO brick form.
So the first question, there were a lot of designers who, first time around seeing a game like Overwatch coming into the LEGO group portfolio was extremely exciting for many designers. So we got a lot of people who showed up and helped out. And of course, we try to find the designers that can help build good models. But some of them are super Overwatch players. know every bit of detail, which I think is important as well to in putting your passion, authenticity into that sort of set you built. So there was a lot of that, but also people coming to the project just helping because they were, one designer, graphic designer, was really good at that his work, but he had some ideas. So there was also a lot of collaborative work within the LEGO Group design team, and then a lot of input from Overwatch, of course, as well, in terms of what they felt what could be interesting and fun to do. And there's all these trade-off discussions because there's so many characters, as you point out. People have a certain passion for one character, and we had to make trade-offs that we know don't always were easy trade-offs, but of course you had to do them. And we also wanted to make sure we had some good, interesting combinations like Diva Reinhardt, but also Junkrat and Hammond and so forth. So wanted to make sure we could put the right sets together at the right sort of when we launched them in different waves, so that it would become interesting for the audience as well. And listening a lot to the community, I would say. I actually think the community from both sides played a huge role in some of the selections of some of the characters because we kept monitoring the conversations in various forums.
That's interesting. I can't remember if you said do you play Overwatch yourself?
Yes.
Do you have a favorite character?
Yes, well, I have several, but my main was in the beginning Bastion, and later on also played a lot of Mercy and a bit of Diva.
So I know Mercy was you got at least Mercy in there, right?
Yeah.
In the one of the sets. Were there any discussions about doing, obviously you talked about balancing the characters that you were doing in the theme sets, but you also have all these settings that are just amazing in Overwatch. How much discussion was there around whether or not to include settings and whether you wanted to include one particular setting versus another?
It's interesting with a game like Overwatch because it's such a character-driven game, and as soon as you, from a LEGO design point of view, want to make sure you have an interesting set for the fan, we had to go in and figure out where does it make sense to play out a scene. Of course, choke points in the maps were one thing. It could also be backdrops. And I remember one particular insight from a research we did in Boston where we had a fan interviewing a fan of Overwatch, and he had clocked in, I think, over 600 hours of play.
Right.
And when he saw the Gibraltar spaceship, he couldn't recognize where it came from.
Oh.
So I think it was interesting because they're so focused on the character and their abilities.
Right.
So we had, and once you start sharing those, of course, you get a little bit sort of curious. What is it that works? What is it that they notice? And then you have to make a set that really drives. A lot of them are built around the characters because that is what Overwatch is about. And then figuring out how to navigate a cool spaceship into a set as well. And then after that, we also added a lot of detail. I don't know if you noticed it, but we have references to other games, Blizzard games in there. There's one of them. There's a nod to Diablo.
Really? No, where's that?
There's a Dorado set. There's a Pinata, which is a nod to the Diablo world. So
you should have put some cows in the background.
But there's so much passion put into the set, and the posters in the Dorado set. There's hidden posters in there as credit to some of the beautiful animations that Blizzard did, but also the Junkrat set. There's the whole background story around Roadhog and Junkrat. There's also these stickers around and so Easter eggs put into the set that we also played around with to really make sure the set came alive and in an authentic and relevant way for the fans.
I want to talk a little bit more about that sort of interaction or intersection of video games and LEGO theme sets. But before I do, I'm curious about the 2019 skin that came out for Bastion. That was a brick Bastion. That was this LEGO brick themed skin. Was that a Blizzard idea, or was that something the LEGO group came up with? And how involved were you all with that?
I would say we had dialogue with Blizzard around it, but it was definitely a Blizzard idea. When it comes to integration in a community-driven game, which I would call Overwatch to a large extent, I personally, sitting with the product line back then, I felt quite responsible for not getting too involved in it because it cannot, in my opinion, be a consumer product going into a game. It has to be a tribute the other way around to the story of Bastion and who is he. And of course, there's a link to LEGO, but I think it's important that it was the Blizzard team and the Overwatch team that came about what they did. We of course looked at some of the early versions, but the colors, the build, everything is from the Overwatch team. And I find that a huge credit because I know they worked really hard on it for every aspect of it, to fit the current rigging of the model, the shading and everything, but also the sound. If you notice, the sound on the model is very different than the original Bastion. And that also is in the dialogue with LEGO and making sure it feels authentic to Bastion, but also has a brick feel to it.
So as a personal fan of Overwatch, I'm assuming that you've been paying close attention to Overwatch 2. Are there any hopes you have for a crossover between the new Overwatch when it comes out and perhaps new LEGO sets themed around that game?
And that would be cool. I think we just keep continuing our dialogue with the Blizzard team and seeing what the future brings. It's a little bit tricky. I think it's also, we want to make sure that we deliver exactly what the fans want and what Blizzard wants. So I think we have a good, I would say even friendship today with the Blizzard team, and then we have a close dialogue going on. Listen also to what the community says and what they're doing. And then, let's see what the future holds.
And so this is, you were talking a little bit about that sort of intersection of video games and the LEGO Group. And it's interesting that despite that sort of, I think that fan base between those two sort of hobbies and passions, there's not a lot of sets. So there's the Minecraft set, now there's the Sonic set that's coming out, both of which started as LEGO Ideas pitches. Obviously, Dimensions had all of those amazing mini sets, and you have Overwatch. Do you think we can expect to see more video game characters and themes coming to LEGO sets in the future that perhaps aren't even Blizzard, but are just kind of across the gambit?
I would hope. I mean, for me, gaming is a franchise approach. So whether it starts, some franchises starts in the movie space or cinema space, so it's VOD space, and others starts in the gaming space and then transforms into these amazing franchises. So I think there's so much out there for us to explore and do more of. And I think I would hope we could do way more. Also, our own fans, right, of LEGO, they're not just fans of movies, they're fans of games. And
right,
as you mentioned, a couple of them yourselves. I'm super excited about the Super Mario collaboration as well. So hopefully a lot more. That would be a big dream.
Well, that was cool talking to Sten about, Overwatch theme sets. And, again, this kind of harkens back to some of the podcasts we've even done, Brian, about, video games that are turned into theme sets. We've got Super Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog, even Dimensions. There's these really cool, iterations of Lego brick sets, that are based on video games. And it's really cool to see those come to life. Yeah. Obviously, for collectors, but also for someone who's just like deeply involved in that world. And man, I can see this, constantly evolving. And I just think we're at the very beginning of this. It's very exciting to see how vast, the LEGO brand expands into the video game space, which I think is really exciting too, Brian.
Yeah, I liked what he said about, likening it to movie properties. And I think he's right. And also, it's important to note that in this day and age, video games are as important or maybe even more important to sort of the younger generation of people coming up now when it comes to what they connect with. And so I think it's great that the LEGO Group seems to recognize that and understands that as important as plucking some of those amazing movie properties out and creating these sets like, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. It's now you've got to look at Super Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog. Mm-hmm. Personally, being a Blizzard super fan myself, I love the Overwatch sets. I'm super anticipating them maybe doing something for Overwatch 2. I think at the latest BlizzCon, they had this amazing Lego brick mosaic that had been made. Yeah. And it showed off a bunch of the Overwatch characters. Maybe that's just art they had there, but I'd love to think that was some subtle hint that Overwatch 2 is going to be getting its own theme sets. Personally, as a fan of Diablo, I would love to see a Diablo theme set come out. And of course, there are a million properties. I'm exaggerating a little, but there's a lot of properties out there that are video games that people love. Final Fantasy, Pac-Man, Space Invaders. Mm-hmm. I'm old. You could tell the games I'm picking. But turning those into Lego brick theme sets would be amazing, I think.
Bits and Bricks is made possible by LEGO Games. Our producer is Ronnie Scher. Your hosts are Ethan Vincent and Brian Crecente. Episode producing and editing by Ethan Vincent. Writing by Brian Crecente. Mixing and sound design by Dan Carlisle. Original music by Peter Premer and Henrik Lindstrand from the award-winning game LEGO Builder's Journey, which you can play on Apple Arcade today. We'd like to thank our participants, Mike Hummel and Sten von der Lysdahl. We'd also like to acknowledge the entire LEGO Games team. For questions or comments, write us at bitsandbricks@lego.com. And as always, stay tuned for more episodes of Bits and Bricks.